Okay, so well, first and foremost, Susan and I were just talking, and I wanted to hit record because she was talking about something important. But for those of you who are watching this on replay, because right now it is just me and Susan at this moment, I just want to say welcome to Spooktober. Today's topic we will be doing classes or chats, really, they're chats, every Wednesday, the month of October at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Just so you know, there'll be different topics, and tonight's topic is about witches, which, if you didn't already know, let me just come out to you now. I'm a witch. And I will get into all that stuff. I have a bunch of notes because there was stuff I didn't want to forget about. But this is a topic that is near and dear to my heart because I am, in fact, a witch. So Susan was just talking about something that happened to, did you say it was your daughter?
Grand-
Sorry.
Granddaughter. My
Granddaughter.
9-year-old
Yeah.
granddaughter.
Yeah. And I thought this was important because you mentioned that the school asked that she not bring Harry Potter books to school
I think
because
it
was
was
it
a book of spells, apparently.
okay. So I was
She,
gonna, because I wanted to talk about the Harry Potter thing because people are like, oh no, it's gonna turn our kids into witches, and it's fiction, right? Like,
yeah,
but Harry Potter it's fiction. The spells don't work like that, and I want to kind of get into that as someone who is a practicing witch. So I do want to get into that, but you mentioned that it was actually a book of spells, not Harry Potter. So I misunderstood. I'm sorry. But yeah, so it sounds like to me, and I will get into this, but it sounds like she might be, and I mean, if it's your granddaughter, how old is
yeah,
she?
9.
So yeah, okay, so she's very young. So it sounds to me like she might just be a natural witch. It might
Yeah,
be it's something. Is it? Do you know? I mean, you don't have to share this if you don't want to because we are recorded. But I'm just curious. Does she have? Is she a hereditary witch where she has like a lineage?
I honestly don't know because
Okay.
she's not my blood granddaughter. She's
Okay.
my daughter's husband's daughter.
Okay.
But
Okay.
I will tell you that her 2 older sisters, who neither of which are blood to me,
Mhm.
also started practicing the craft a little bit, and this was just on their own.
Okay.
And I just had a rule at my house when they were doing love spells or something, and I just said only white magic, and then and please don't burn my house down.
Yeah. Yeah. Certainly
Just
have
left them
boundaries.
alone.
Yeah. Boundaries. Good. Yeah. Thumbs up. Can't really see, but yeah. Okay.
I'll put the video on, but I'm really comfortable in my bedroom.
Okay.
So, am I there?
Oh, I see. I don't
Or
see
do you see a
you.
wall?
Yeah. There you
I
are.
am. All
There you
propped up
are.
on a stack of pillows.
All right.
Where'd you
So
go?
yes, so yeah, like I said, I mean, I have my notes in case I needed to kind of carry this, but if you have anything you'd like to share, again, stories or questions, uh, do let me know. Um, but yeah, it sounds to me just by the sounds of it, if she's not a hereditary witch, it sounds like it does sound like there might be some because they've got the sisters as well, so it sounds like it's something that if they're not already hereditary witches, that they're probably the first of that line from the sounds of it.
Yeah. Well, our family is very much into where our primary claim to fame is more paranormal investigations. So, she's grown up
Okay.
around ghosts and haunted houses, and she's used to talking boards and all that. So she just thinks that anything like this is just perfectly normal.
Oh, that's awesome. I love
And
that.
so, yeah.
I hope you'll be around for I think it's this next Wednesday coming up where the topic is specifically about ghosts
Oh,
because it
God,
sounds
yes.
like you'll have a lot of stories and
Oh, yeah.
experiences to share. So I hope you're around for that one.
Oh, yeah. I'm just all excited for that one.
Awesome. All right. So it sounds like you might already know a lot of, or at least some of about this stuff, but for those who are watching that may not know. So I do have, just to let you know, there are some differences. So like I said, I have some notes here just in case I needed to carry some stuff, or if people had questions, but they were too nervous to ask maybe. So as I mentioned, I'm a witch, and a witch is someone who practices witchcraft or ceremonial magic. I'm not someone who has, I don't have like deities, or like I don't follow, and I have a bunch of notes here, but I'm not like I'm not pagan, I'm not Wiccan. Those are both more religious based, and I am non-religious in that I'm just a person who practices witchcraft, which is a witch. That's really what that boils down to. It's a very, when you boil it all down, it's just someone who practices witchcraft. And so, or ceremonial magic. Now a pagan, again, is more, and this is not an exhaustive list that of things I'm going to talk about here. And I don't speak for the entire community. Okay, this is just based off of, my experience and, some of my friends, because I have quite a few witch and pagan and Wiccan type of friends. So basing it off of that as well. So take what resonates and leave the rest, as I always say. So someone who is pagan is typically, it's more religious in the sense of it's deity based. So there's typically, they're going to worship a god and a goddess, or they'll have multiple gods and goddesses that they work with. And they celebrate seasonal festivals, such as, some of these I can't pronounce very well, so pardon me, but so you have their seasonal festival. So it's like kind of like, if we want to go with like a mainstream kind of thing. So if you're Christian, typically you're going to celebrate things like Easter, Christmas, like that kind of thing. And the pagans have their own sort of those same festivals, which is a lot of the Christian stuff is actually based off of it, whether the Christians know it or not. A lot of their traditions are actually based in pagan traditions. So they will, a lot of pagans will celebrate Yule, Imbolc, Ostara, Beltane, Midsummer. This one I struggle with to say. Lugnasad, Mabon, and Samhain. And Samhain is Halloween for all you muggles out there, as I'll call it, if you're not sure what Samhain is. Now it's, well, because it's my own personal pet peeve, a lot of people will pronounce it, if you're not a witch or into any of that stuff, because it looks like it's spelled Sam Hain, but it's actually pronounced Samhain. And this is really where, and I've been a part of these celebrations with my actual pagan friends, even though I don't identify, if you will, as pagan. I've been a part of a lot of Samhain festivals because a lot of my friends are pagan or Wiccan, and they also celebrate those. So, and Samhain really is about, how do I put this? I'm trying to think of the word. It's not, what is the word I'm looking for? It's like reflection on those who have passed over and kind of giving thanks. It's very ancestor based. So you're giving gratitude to your ancestors, or again, others who have passed. And I've had some very emotional Samhains. It's very near and dear to my heart, despite the fact that I, again, do not identify as pagan, because my practice, I don't have, it's not deity based at all. So I don't have a god and a goddess, or gods and goddesses, if you will. And I typically don't celebrate a lot of the festivals apart from Samhain, but that one's just, I think Samhain really speaks to me more so because I'm a medium. I don't think it actually has anything directly to do with my craft. It's more just a medium thing. I've always been someone who has been very close to that spiritual realm, right? The spirit world. So that's, I will typically celebrate Samhain just on my own. So we also have what's called a solitary witch or a coven. I'm a solitary witch, which means I practice alone. I don't have a group of people that I practice with. So with a coven, you'll typically have 3 or more people, and you all practice your craft together, right? So if you're doing any kind of magic, you're going to do it as a group in a coven. Whereas with me, I'm a solitary witch, so I practice all by myself. Okay, so next we have Wiccan, which is another religion it's kind of under the pagan umbrella, but it was, whereas paganism has been around for millennia, right? Wicca was created in the 1950s, so very recently in comparison, by Gerald Garner. So some people I think call it Gardner or Gardine Wicca. I might be saying that wrong. Again, not Wiccan, so my apologies if I'm saying it incorrectly. And to the best of my knowledge, Wiccans are mostly nature-based. So they very much, from what I know, are sort of, they really, I don't know if I want to say worship Mother Nature, but they're very nature-based that way. They're very much about the corner. So earth, air, fire, water. Some might incorporate spirit as well. So then you have your pentagram, right? And theirs is a higher, how do you say that word? My mouth doesn't want to say it. It's a hierarchy, anyways, a hierarchy system that consists of, typically anyways, of a high priestess and of a high priest and priestess. And they have various initiations in order to be considered a part of this religion, right? As far as I know, you can't just decide today, I'm going to be Wiccan. You know, it's something that you have to do a lot of initiations in order to actually be a part of this religion. And again, as far as I know, their main, the Wiccan read is do what thou wilt, but harm none. And they have what's called a threefold rule, meaning anything you put out comes back to you threefold. So if you do decide, hey, you know what, I'm going to go hex that person, which is not Wiccan, by the way, but if you say, hey, I'm going to go hex that person, guess what? You're going to get that energy back to you ×3. That's the belief in this religion. Or if you put out something good, you get it back ×3, right? And again, even though I myself am not pagan or Wiccan or any of that, I'm not under a religious umbrella, I just practice witchcraft. It sits in my personal values to have that Wiccan read of harm none, right? Do what thou will, harm none. So I practice, now when I was about to say white witchcraft. Now some people have a little bit of about the different kinds of magic. So some people will just say, like what I was going to say, just white witchcraft, meaning all good, right? We do no harm, it's always all positive, high vibe kind of stuff. Other people practice what's considered dark magic or black magic, and they're very much about harming. That's really as far as my understanding of it is, they go out of their way to practice magic that is going to harm others. And in some cases, again, take what resonates, leave the rest. In some cases, they may even call on demonic type of energies or something like that, even if they're not calling them demonic, but those lower vibe type of entities to kind of help them do their bidding or to give them extra power, what have you. Not all of them. Some of them are just, using their own will, right? Their own magic, their own will, and kind of putting out stuff that can harm others. They can be gross and really like harming animals and such like that. It can be. That's not a hard and fast rule. Pardon me. But some will do that. Now, there are others who argue that there is no black and white magic. There is only gray, meaning that combination of, right, it's really about the intent when it comes to magic. And so some people will argue that there is no black and there is no, like black or white. It's just gray. I am not one of those people. I, if you want to believe that it's all gray, cool, no worries. I personally like to use the term white magic in my practice. Um, and I follow the Wiccan read of do what thou will, harm none, because it matches with my values. That's about it. So I do have a note here. Most witches are non-harming. So I do want to kind of talk about that myth a little bit as far as witches go. So for, hundreds of years, when Christianity really took over, and then you had, the witch trials and all that, a couple hundred years later, witches really got a bad rap. Okay, so we were kind of considered, monsters, really, like in the sense of like demons and whatnot. Like you might think of something like that, like where we, had, I don't know, what do you want to say? What do I want to say here? Powers that are that witches don't have, to be honest. Like we don't have the power to do certain things that witches were accused of back in the day, like sinking ships and making it so that it never rains, so all the crops die. That's We wouldn't do that, for one thing. Why would we? But having all this like magic that you might even see in movies and think, oh, that's what a witch can do, right? That we're like levitating each other and like in the craft, levitating each other and flying and all that jazz, and causing you to see your worst nightmares. We can't do that. We can't do that. I don't care if you're a white witch, black witch, gray witch. I don't care what kind of witch you are. You can't do that. It's not something we can do. We don't fly. I know I have a little picture here because I think it's cute, but of a witch on a broomstick, but we can't fly. We can astral travel, and that is a type of witch, but I will get to that. So in a sense, witches can fly that way as far as astral travel goes, but you don't have to be a witch to astral travel. People do it all the time and they don't even mean to. Doesn't mean they're a witch. So I did want to kind of do a little bit of a myth busting here, though, that witches are not created by Satan, right? We didn't kiss his butthole and gain powers. We're not, feeding our familiars with little teats all over our body, right? Like some of this stuff is just asinine to me personally. But yeah, so I will say though, most witches are non-harming, even if they don't use the Wiccan read. It just doesn't line up. Harming others is just not. It doesn't line up with their values. They just have no interest in it. And along that same line, when we're doing our magic, typically it's a type of manifestation, right? So if you're into, The Secret and, manifesting and all that jazz, that's kind of what witches do, right? That's really our big thing, is manifesting through will. So we can do things like Susan had mentioned about her granddaughter trying to heal a child who had scraped their knee. Yep, that's energy healing. You don't have to be a witch to do that, but it is something that witches do. And it's something that, and when it comes to that healing, now that I'm saying it, when it comes to healing, back in the day of the witch trials and all that, that's what witches were doing. That's what they did. They were healers. That's really what their magic was. The vast majority of them were healers. And yeah, sure, they might do like some love potions here and there, and that kind of stuff. But the vast majority of witches that may or may not have even identified as witches at the time, especially because they could be killed for it, were healers. They were making, potions and using herbs and all that to heal people. So like even going right back to the origins of witches, we were trying to help people. If anything, we were casting spells to make it rain so that the crops would grow, not the other way around. Because if the crops don't grow, guess what? We'll die too. Like it just doesn't make any sense to me that people thought about that stuff. We don't eat babies. That popped into my head too. We don't eat babies. There was that's just it just gets my goat. A friend of mine used to tease me about that when we were kids, because I've been a witch since forever. Like I can't remember not being a witch. And so a friend of mine, because he knew it bugged me and it irked me, would always come by and be like, "Hey, baby eater." And I'm like, "I don't eat babies." We don't believe that you know, baby's blood or body parts or any of that stuff is going to keep us young. Okay, I don't care what Hocus Pocus says, right? We don't do any of that stuff. We're not eating babies and we're not drinking their blood. If any of us use blood in a ritual, it's going to be our own blood, and it's going to be a very tiny amount, right? But we're not using anybody else's blood. We're not sacrificing people or animals. Okay. Like I said, there are some black magic witches who might, and the vast majority of us witches will kind of like shun those guys and be like, they're not one of us, right? Because we don't do that. Um, so with that said, I will mention some tools that we do use. Again, not an exhaustive list here. So just kind of a handful of things. So we'll use athames or wands. So an athame, it's like a little knife, if you will, like a little knife. And it's used to direct energy, like a wand. So I have both. I have an athame and a wand, and depending on how I feel or what needs to be used, sometimes I'll use an athame to direct the energy. Sometimes I'll use my wand. Just depends. A lot of us will use candles, herbs, oils, salt, feathers. Okay, so it's not, but like I said, this is not an exhaustive list. Those are just a handful of things, and it depends on the witch you are and the type of craft you practice. Okay. Okay, I know I have a habit of going too fast and kind of rambling on. So is there anything? Let me just see if Susan, no, Susan, do you have anything? Need me to slow
No,
down?
no, I mean, the only thing I would add is based on some of my studies of the history of witchcraft is that one of the issues that the women that came before us had, that they were wise women, they were very, very respected, and
Okay.
they were leaders. And here's my feminist plug, they
Mm-hmm.
offended the patriarchy. And they
Yeah.
had to be controlled because the people would listen to them instead of the designated representatives.
Yeah, absolutely. For sure. Because I've definitely seen oh, we got Brittany coming in now. Uh, but yeah, I've seen a lot of times too, like if you look at, was it the Salem witch trials, which is so famous, is why I bring it up. But that a lot of the times it was, they were trying to get rid of, for one thing, they accused a lot of like the poor people, right? They went after the poor people because they're like, gross, get out of here, right? And then sometimes a lot of the times they would accuse people who were um they were either jealous of or they just didn't like the poor people, right? They just didn't like them, or they saw them as, like you said, like a threat. So yeah, so a lot of the stuff they came up with back then is just ridiculous. Like how, like I was saying about the familiar, how we were feeding our familiars with, with these little like marks on our body. So if you had a mole, or for me, like I have freckles everywhere, I was gonna die. Like if it's the witch trials, I'm dead. I have moles, I have freckles everywhere. Like, and so if you had any mark on your body, that was considered, that it was a mark of the devil or whatever, and you're feeding your familiars this way. Um, but yeah, so Susan, do you have more? Do you know more on the history of witchcraft? I'm just curious.
Oh, well, I mean, I've been studying, especially during COVID.
Mm,
I mean, that's when I personally felt called to it because I had this long phase in my life where even though I think I was a natural born witch with the connections to, first of all, rocks. I'm always collecting
mm,
rocks in the forest and everything.
mm-hmm.
But I was taught that witchcraft was evil.
Okay.
And I had this Pentecostal streak like this I had to get past to go back
Mm,
and really reconnect with the craft. But I mean,
mm-hmm.
but just to study, just a lot of it. I mean, it's like even like I'm a woman of a, how can I put this? of a certain age. You know, folks, I'm old. My hair's white. And the problems they used to have with older women, a lot of the witches,
Hmm.
well, they would call them crowns. Like I said before, you know, they're respected and stuff. And,
Hmm.
you know, they couldn't control these women because so much of everything is about power and control.
Hmm.
And, you know, I mean, even when you look at the history of the church, the Christian church, and a lot of other religious organizations too, it's about power and control. And I would have died really quickly as a witch because I can't be controlled.
Yeah,
Well,
same.
I'm not gonna put up with it.
Yeah, same. Yeah, now that you mention it, it just brought to mind, was it Bridget? Oh, I had her last name, but I think she was the first of the
Yeah.
Salem witch trials. I think she was the first one to have been hanged. Bridget something.
I
Oh,
should know that.
I just had it. But she was someone who was, as you mentioned, a very like powerful presence. Like she was a very strong-willed woman who wore bright colors, and I think she may have owned the tavern. And I think something to do with, if I'm remembering correctly, I think she owned an apple orchard, maybe. But she was someone who was very vocal and
Mhm.
what is it, like she was just, yeah, very, like I said, she wore bright colors and she was very vocal and loud and just a, a strong woman. And yeah, sure enough, she, I believe, was the first one, if not one of the first ones to be hung during those trials.
Yeah, because one of the things is, I don't think anybody was ever burned at the stake in Salem. I think
Not
they
in
were all
Salem,
hung and
no.
drowned, or might have been stoned. I'm looking it up right now.
Yeah, no, I think most of them in Salem were hung, and I think one of them was crushed.
Yeah,
Um, but most of the witches from the mm, some of the research I've done, most of them were hung. Few were burned. A lot were drowned. A lot were drowned.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah. I don't know. It's not coming up really easy. I've got a
Okay.
bunch of it, but yeah,
Okay. So I will add in. So, like I said, we do have a lot of different types of witches. So like I said, we have the solitary and we have the coven, but then we also have, again, not an exhaustive list. This is just a handful. So for myself personally, I call myself an angelic witch, or an angel witch, because I work with angels in the angelic realm. So that's what I work with. So, and again, with that spiritual, spirit guides and all that jazz. And you don't have to be a witch to work with that, but that is what I work with when I'm doing my craft. Specifically, I do use some tools, but if I'm, working with entities, if you will, on my behalf, or asking, petitioning, if you will, for some aid, I will work with the angels, and I work with the angelic realm and the angelic rays. Um, so, like I said, for me personally, what lines up with my personal values is white magic. And so a lot of my spells are having to do with helping others. So I'll work a lot with the Archangel Raphael for healing purposes, and he works with the green, he, she, they. They don't really have a gender. So pardon me if I use pronouns. Uh, but I work with the Archangel Raphael most often, and working with the Green Ray, which is the healing ray. So I will do a lot of, and again, I do a lot of just energy healing work just anyways. But if I'm going to do magic around it, I'm going to do it with the Archangel Raphael. I will also do, I've worked quite a bit with the Archangel Michael and the Blue Ray of Protection, specifically when it comes to going into a home and doing cleansing work and protection work around a home. So if there's been Unfortunately, I've had a lot of interaction, if you will, with demons. And so, of course, I will bring in the Archangel Michael to help banish those and to help cross over any earthbound spirits that have been stuck, because sometimes they get stuck. But I'll get into that in the next one. I also work a lot with the Archangel Zadkiel in the purple ray of transmutation. So we're transmuting energy at that point. And so again, because it lines up with my values, so often I will be transmuting what I would call low vibe or negative, okay, energies, or what do I want to say? Like when I'm doing shadow work, okay, and I want to take something that I want, an aspect of myself that I once rejected, and now I want to integrate it, right? So I will work with the Archangel Zadkiel to help me do that. If I'm working with earthbound stuff, so if I'm looking for, maybe I want to manifest more, like if I want to do a money spell, okay, I'm going to ask the Archangel Ariel to help me, because she is earthbound, not earthbound, but like she takes care of all that stuff. And again, my apologies for using pronouns, but that's typically how Ariel comes through to me, is as female. So if I'm going to do that, I'll typically petition her to help me with anything that's earthly, earthly stuff. Pardon me. Okay. So, and I also use the pentacles, so the earth, air, fire, water, spirit, along with the watchtowers. But when I do watchtowers, I use the archangels to do that. So Michael, we have Michael, Gabriel, why am I blanking? Raphael. Oh, why am I blanking?
Uriel.
There we go. I'm blanking on it, but which is, she is what she is. Okay, so, but we have our corners, and I work with that. So moving on. We also have moon witches or cosmic witches. So moon witches will typically practice magic during certain moon phases, and some will also incorporate astrology and astronomy into their witchcraft. So they work off of where the planets are in the sky, where the sun is in its phases, on what type of spell they're going to work at that time. And then we have the hereditary witch, which we mentioned earlier, which is someone who is born into it. They may have a long line. Typically, they will have a long line of witches, but sometimes it's just, like if I were to have a kid, mine would be hereditary because I'm already there. I might be the first one of that line, but it goes on like that. And I have some friends who their children are hereditary right there. They practice after that. So, and then we have eclectic witch, which takes from various, traditions. So an eclectic witch will they might go, a little bit, and I'll get into this in a minute, but they might take a little bit from the green witches, or a little bit from the kitchen witches, a little bit from the angelic witch, or they'll work with the moon phases, right? So they take a little bit from wherever. Okay. Okay, so now we also have the green witch. So this one is incredibly nature-based, and they're very in tune with the seasons. They work specifically with the seasons, and they practice a lot of their, like the tools that they use in their magic is going to be like plants and herbs. They may dabble in kitchen witchcraft rather, where they add it to their food, but more often than not, a green witch is going to have a lot of plants in their home, and working with, again, the different seasons, the different herbs that are in season, different plants, all that jazz. So they're extremely nature-based. Even if they aren't Wiccan, as we were mentioning earlier, they practice green witchcraft, which means they predominantly will use plants and herbs in their craft. Next, we have the kitchen witch. These ones like to incorporate witchcraft within their cooking. and they like to make their home, like their entire space, their home, a sacred space. So myself personally, I have an altar, right? Just like I have one little, like in a corner space, I have an altar. That is my sacred space. But the kitchen witch, typically their whole home, or they'll dedicate maybe even a whole room, but typically they will make their entire home their sacred space. So when you walk into their space, typically it's going to be extremely inviting, very comfy. They kind of give me like Taurus Cancer vibes, and like they just really want everything to be comfy, cozy, and inviting. At least the ones that I know, anyways. So, and like I said, they are called kitchen witches because a lot of their craft has to do with food. They put it into their food. So if they're going to manifest, say they want to do again, we'll say a money spell or a love spell, right? They're going to do it by adding certain ingredients into their food. And then as they eat it, that's going to be like them working their magic and bringing that to fruition. We also have a hedge witch, which I'm kind of like borderline on a little bit because of my mediumship. So a hedge witch works with the liminal spaces in the spirit realm. Okay, so that's why I say I'm like a little bit there because of my mediumship, and I do work a lot with spirit. Not really when it comes to like spirits, like earthbound spirits or even crossed over spirits. I don't include them in my witchcraft. That's more like a medium thing. Like I'm going to communicate with them to bring about a message, whereas a hedge witch might actually work with them. Where like I work with angels, they might work with spirit. Okay, or the spirit realm. And they are more typical to astral travel and all that, like on purpose. Like that's how they fly, right? Is through astral travel. And they're very good at being in those in between spaces. That's why they're hedge witch. They're that in between space. So in between the physical and the spiritual dimensions, right? They work in between. Okay. And I think that was all I had for this particular list. Okay, so let me see. Does anybody have any questions or stories they want to share? I see Brittany's around. I don't know if she's chatty. No, no. Susan?
I did look up the watchtower for you,
Oh, okay.
and your archangels are Uriel, Raphael, Michael, and Gabriel.
Yeah, there it is. I was like, there's one that I just cannot, my brain just did not want to. See, I don't know much about witches. Okay. Okay, but thank you for that. There's just I was like, I could see it like in my mind. I was like, come on. And it just did not, you know, when you have something that's just like on the tip of your tongue, you're like, come on. It just did not want to come through. Yeah. Mhm.
Did have experience with the Archangel Michael last weekend on an investigation, but I don't know if you
Oh,
want me to share it here or wait till ghosts.
that's up to you. That's totally up to you. You can share it whenever you want.
We our paranormal team hosts paranormal experiences at various places, and one of our favorite places, my favorite place to investigate, is the Outlaws and Miners Jail in Cripple Creek, Colorado.
Hmm.
And we were downstairs in the basement, and one of the workers there said she felt like there was a new entity that had moved in. And just recently, maybe in the past month or two, and we had a couple ladies with us that were pretty sensitive.
Hmm.
So I was just kind of keeping an eye on them. And one of them is like, she was sort of kind of halfway channeling stuff, but it seemed like she was enjoying it and she's in control. And, so I didn't really worry about it. And all of a sudden, she had said, "This thing is in me."
Oh no.
And so we said, "Well, did you give her permission to be in you?" She said, "No." I said, "Tell them they don't have permission. They have to leave." So she did that and she did that. And it wasn't going anywhere. And she was crying and she's in stress. And it's like, call on the Archangel Michael. And she called on the Archangel. And we both called on him. And the thing left, whatever it was. and she just felt like an immediate lifting of the oppression. So whatever it was, Archangel Michael was there.
Yeah, yeah, wow, that's awesome. Yeah, that reminds me of a because I do work with him quite a bit, like as you do with the like you're mentioning about having when you're doing paranormal investigation or in my case coming through as the medium in the room,
Mhm.
working with Michael, and I've had a couple of occasions where um he just like stepped in. Like I didn't even like call him or anything. He just stepped in. It was like, I got this, right? So yeah, like I've had one where I think I mentioned it before. It might have been in the mediumship video I did. Uh, one where, and I didn't see who it was, but I'm convinced it was Michael, that he had tore through the fabric of reality, punched through into this woman's back and ripped out the demon that was in her.
Wow.
And then like, because so what happened was, so I astral traveled. This was not something I meant to do, but it was something that I was meant to see. And so I astral traveled to this person's house. So I'm floating over and I'm just watching, I'm just observing, because that's the only reason I'm there is to observe. And I was brought there. It wasn't something I meant to do. It just there I was, floated on over, and there I was watching. And I saw this rip in the fabric of reality, and it was just like this, and that's all I could, that's the only way I can describe it. It was like a rip, and there was like white light coming through it. This hand punched through, and I mean with force, uh, went into, like, punched through into the woman's back with force, ripped out this black thing that I can only describe as a demon, and then went back through the chair, and then it just closed up, and then and I'm just like floating there, like, what the hell, right? What did I just see? And then just floated back into my body and woke up. I talked to the woman the next day. Well, I talked to her, but I hadn't told her what had happened yet. I was just kind of like, we were just talking. And she was like, man, my back is really sore today. And I was like, girl, I got something to tell you. Like, I saw it, I know what happened. And there was a couple of times where, um, and I'll bring him in too. This might be something, Susan, you may or may not, this you may or may not use this as well, but I also use or call on Michael when I'm doing removals like that. So if I'm like doing, because demons will, they have cords, right? So they'll like attach like a cord, like a plug-in, typically along the spine, but it's usually on the back, but typically along the spine, they'll plug in. And so oftentimes I will ask the Archangel Michael to come in with his flaming sword and burn that off, right? To either burn off the, like, to remove it, pull it out, use his sword to remove that, or really it's the blue flame or the ray, right? And he comes in, he burns that off and takes it out. So I work with him in that too. But yeah, there's, like I said, I didn't see that it was Michael. Like, I wasn't like, this, big angelic presence that came through, but I am convinced that's who it was. Cause I'm like, who else could be powerful enough to like bust through the fabric of reality, rip this thing out of that woman's back, and then close up that thing. I was like, whoa. So yeah.
I stay away from demons whenever possible.
Good call.
Outside my skill set, and I like it that way.
Yeah, yeah, and I will be talking more about demons. I think it's the last one we're doing this month. I think on the 26th, because unfortunately I do have a lot of experience in that area. Um, but yeah, I avoid them when you can, for sure.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's interesting because you talk about white magic, and how we don't want to do any harm.
mhm.
And then there are those people that really just piss you off. So my
Mm,
favorite spell, well, my second favorite spell, my first spell that I use all the time is where did I put this or that? Because I'm always losing stuff.
yeah.
It's like, may you get what you deserve.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one. Yeah, and that's why, that's why a lot of, well, not a lot, but there are witches out there who say there is no black and white, there's only gray, because of that kind of thing, right? So you could have someone who, yeah, maybe they just piss you off and you're like, oh, I hope karma gets you, right?
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
and then there's some where, like I've had uh, people who, myself actually, this is a story, so I'll mention this. So when I was a teenager, I was a jerk. And I was a jerk with witch powers. So, oh no. And so I had done, so like my values now and have been for many years is harm none. But there was a time that maybe I was more little more gray than white. And I wanted this girl. I was like 15 or something like that, and I wanted this girl to stay away from my boyfriend because I was that chick. And so I had done a spell where I just wanted her to be sick, right? Just like be like get the flu kind of thing, like because
Yeah.
she was just like at the time, I won't go into a big long story, but I was living with my boyfriend at the time. Yes, we were teenagers, but I would have been homeless otherwise. So I was living there and she was there. We had a bunch of us. So there's a bunch of us teenagers that really just kind of hung out at my boyfriend's house. And she happened to be one of the ones that came in and had eyes for my man. And I was not having it at the time. And so I was like, okay, well, I just want her to be sick enough to like go away, right? I just wanted her to go home. Really, that's really what the intention behind it was. But so my whole thing was just, make her sick as a dog, make her sick as a dog, make her sick as a dog. And it worked immediately. Um, she immediately came down with the flu. Like I went downstairs and she had the flu. Like it was wild. Like it freaked me out how fast and how hard it hit her. To my dismay, it did not make her go home. She was just sick at my house or at my
Oh,
boyfriend's
no.
house. She just stayed there and she was sick. So yeah, I wasn't always a good girl, but and I've done bindings and stuff like that that I was trying to do to help somebody else, but it actually backfired in a sense and made them really sick. So that was a bummer because my whole intention behind that particular binding spell, I thought they were, getting into some dark stuff and I was getting really kind of afraid for them. And so it's like, oh, I'm just going to do a binding spell to try and protect them from themselves. And I ended up making them horrifically sick. And so that one really backfired. And he was really mad because I told him after, I was like, I was trying to help. I'm so sorry. And he was really mad at me because he got really sick.
Uh,
Plus, yeah. And so that was a little bit of an invasion on my part. So that was a lesson I learned too, that again, I was a kid at that time. I was still just like a teenager and running wild. Uh, and yeah, and so it was a little bit of something that I've learned since to not try to, what is the word? Control somebody else, right? So, or to try, to try and bind them that way or try to mess with their stuff, right? Yes, my intention behind it was good. I was trying to help them. I was trying to protect them from themselves, but you got to let people do what they're going to do, right? Uh, so yeah, so I wasn't always a good girl, but I got better. I don't do those things anymore, but there are some times where, for sure, because I am huge. I know I'm going off into a ramble now, but I am huge into true crime. Like, love me some true crime, a little too much. And I'll tell you what, if I was a little more into that gray area, there's some stuff where I would have been like, oh, I really hope karma bites you in the ass, right? You really want that person to get what they deserve because they do some really, truly horrific stuff. But I don't. I won't do it. Uh, so yeah, but yeah. So there we are. Uh, so I know Brittany here said she's listening, but she doesn't really know much about witches. I know you came in a little bit late, but do you have any questions or anything? I may have already answered them, but if you want to either come off mute or if you want to just be in the chat, if you have any questions that came up.
I just didn't know that there were different ones, like how you were saying, like the Gray Witch and everything. For me, I was like, I associated it basically of what I saw. Like, I heard about the covens and stuff only
Mhm.
because some of them used to fly in, but I never knew that there were so many different categories to be in.
Yeah, yeah. And so, like I said, this was not an exhaustive list. Some will even argue that there is many types of witchcraft as there are witches. So not an exhaustive one, but yeah, there are certainly different ones where there's just like a niche, if you will. There are some witches that just have like a niche, or unless you're eclectic, which I guess is technically a niche, but they take a little bit from everybody. So, and I was eclectic for quite some time. But as my crafts are developed and my, I came into like really set in my values and all that, working with angels was really what called to me. So they have their sigils and stuff like that that we use, but yeah, so we're coming up.
Class.
Sorry, Susan?
Sigils would be a fun class.
I'm
Sigils.
sorry. I didn't hear you.
Symbols.
Symbols. Yeah. No, I did a little bit of so I did some, we have different symbols because you have like your runes and stuff like that. So it really kind of depends on the witch, really, because there are different types of symbols. And you could even you make up even your own, right? So you have some, like I have a bunch of witchcraft books off to the side here, and there's different symbols that are sort of recognized as, this is the symbol for earth, this is symbol for air, water,
Right.
and you have your symbols for your different spells. So you might use like a heart for a love spell, or you might use the money symbol for money. Some use runes, so that's more going to be your like Nordic type pagans. We're going to use runes. Not all of them though. Some just eclectic witches might use runes. And then you have, when it comes to at least angelic anyways, we have symbols that more so, I did some research on them, and you have like, it's a really interesting topic where, because a lot of them come from, a lot of the symbols will come from what's what is that? It's I think it's Hebrew astrology. So you'll see it in Hebrew astrology. You do, sorry, Susan, what's that?
The Kabbalah.
Yeah. So you have the Kabbalah that gets in there. There's also it's John Dee, and he worked with somebody, and I cannot think of their name right now. It's completely slipping my mind. That came up with what's called Enochian, which I am a little, I don't use Enochian personally, because I don't trust John Dee, and he worked with somebody else, and now for the life of me, I cannot think of his name. I might have to come back to it sometime or put it in the group or something. And what they did was they channeled, or they say they channeled these symbols and this language, this Enochian language, that they channeled it over a great deal of time. But if you look at John Dee and the other guy's background, they're not great people. They're a little shifty to me. There's some shifty characters, so I don't really trust what they brought forth as this Enochian language. I mean, really, it comes down to, if you believe in it, right? If you put your energy into it and it works, great. Personally, I think John Dee and his partner, I want to say his name was like Edward or something like that, but they were some shifty characters, and I don't trust what they channeled. Either they're not telling the truth about channeling it, or in John Dee's case, I think he channeled from unknowingly. Now, if you look at the history of it, I think he unknowingly channeled a demon, or what is that called? Gregory, maybe? It's like a fallen angel, right? So an angel who is not of the light, who once was an angel, but is has become something else, something on the darker end. And I think John Dee, if he was in fact channeling an entity, I think it was a fallen angel, or possibly a demonic. And so that's another reason why I don't trust Enochian, because I don't know, if it's, if it was truly channeled, and B, what it was channeled by, right? I don't trust that it was an angel of the light, if you will. So I don't use that. But yeah, I might maybe post it in the group if you're interested, but there's a YouTube channel called Esoterica, and he goes really into a lot of stuff, a lot of the esoteric stuff, but he went really thorough into Enochian and like the symbols around that, and uh, angelic symbols within Hebrew language and all of that stuff. He went big time into it. So if you're interested in that, I can always put those links in the group.
Do you just
Mhm.
do you have, you mentioned your books. Do you have a favorite grimoire or something that you could tell us about to good introduction to witchcraft? I know I have a couple that I like, but Brittany mentioned that she didn't know a whole lot and a good place to start.
Well, let's see. Like when it comes to the angelic stuff, I really just work off of my own thing. Um, I have a lot of like books and stuff on angels and all of that, so I was able to incorporate that stuff. But when it comes to witchcraft, I would say, let's see, who do I have? Yeah, it's Cunningham. What is that? Scott Cunningham. I'm a big fan of Scott Cunningham. I think he was more into the Wiccan side of the religion, or of the craft, rather. He does a lot of like Wicca, but I have a lot of Scott Cunningham stuff. What else do I have?
I have one here that I ordered off Amazon, my best friend.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a nice introduction, easy read, lots of pictures. It's called The Complete Grimoire. And it's magical practices and spells for awakening your inner witch. And it goes into the history and the symbols. It's by Lydia Pradas. I don't know. And she's a Wiccan.
Okay.
It's something like that. If Brittany's interested, she might want to look into it.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I would say a lot of, what do I have? Because it depends too. Like I said, it depends on the type of witch you are. If you're interested in paganism, and then there's a whole host of stuff when it comes to paganism. Because like you have your Celts, your Nordics, like
Goods.
Yeah, like the Greeks, the Romans, Egyptians. Yeah. I know they have a convention every November, I think, if I remember. Okay.
Because
Do
I
they
used
have
to
like
work at the airport, and there was a huge, like, I guess, witches convention,
Mhm.
and they would come from all over, and they would meet up in certain areas, and it would be like a huge, like, family event. I think it was like 7 or 8 days or something like that.
Oh
But
wow.
they do meet up, and I remembered I asked, I was like, you have some interesting items here. And she was like, oh yeah, it's a witches convention. So I'm not sure what it's called, but I think it was November every year that they meet up. But that's the only thing that I know.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I know that we haven't done them here for a little bit, but for we did I think 2 or 3 years in a row, we had what was called Pagan Pride. And so that would be a bunch of us. I mean, again, whether you identified as pagan or just a witch, right? There'd be a few of us that would come and do that. Usually, it was like around either the end of August or like in September, depending on uh, where we could, because we usually did in the park if we could. So yeah, but that would only be for like a few hours. It would just be for like that one day, and we would have a bunch of we would either have different rituals that we would do, or in some cases, like it depended. Like we would have vendors. In one case, we had someone who was a belly dancer. Like that's not really a witchy thing, but we had it, and she did it, and it was cool. Yeah. But yeah, I can't think of any one specific book that I would necessarily recommend, just because it does depend on if they're pagan, what type of pagan, if they're Wiccan, if they're just a witch, what type of witch, right? So, and like Brittany was saying, a lot of the books, anyways, that I've read, anyways, personally, a lot of what I know is just, they'll just be like, here's a book of spells, ta-da, you're a witch, right? You don't necessarily, it's not necessarily geared to a specific niche. Like I do have one that says green witchcraft, and so there is that. But most of the books that I have or I've read are very much just about Wicca, or like a one size fits all type of witch, and that is really kind of not the case. There's a variety of them. So yeah. Is there anything? Okay. I think I got everything I wanted to mention. I'm sure once, because it happens to me all the time. So I'll be like, yeah, this is all I wanted to mention. And then I'll like stop recording and be like, oh, there was a bunch of stuff, right, that I just forgot to note. Um, but I think that was all I had. Is there anything else, again, questions or stories you guys want to share?
No, I think it's a nice intro.
Yeah, I didn't want it to go on too long, because you know me, if you've been here before, then you know a bitch can go on, but I didn't want it to be too long. I mean, if there was more questions, like I'm glad you guys are here, and if you had stories or whatever, but I wanted to make sure that like I had my notes of things that I wanted to mention, and I wanted to make sure there was room for stories and questions. But I think that was it. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I don't think so. I don't think so though. But yeah, I just really wanted to, when it comes to, I just wanted to mention there was a lot of like myths I just wanted to bust and stuff like that, like that we don't eat babies or drink their blood. Like we're just not doing that. A lot of, like I said, a lot of my spells have more to do with healing, or if I'm trying to personally manifest something, I'm going to manifest like money or what have you. But the vast majority of spells I do are healing spells for others. And that's going to, and sometimes I will use things like crystal boards, or, I'll incorporate energy healing like Reiki or angel therapy specifically, depending on what I feel to do. But when it comes to actual like magic, really what we're doing is we're trying to manifest through will. So you don't even need all of those tools. So I'll mention that really quickly too, because I did mention that I do use tools, but you don't need to. Like I said, the story I talked about earlier, where when I was a kid and I wanted to make that girl sick, I used no tools. I literally sat on my bed, or my boyfriend's bed really, but I sat on my boyfriend's bed and just chanted over, and I closed my eyes, focused my attention, and chanted over and over and over. Make her sick as a dog, make her sick as a dog, make her sick as a dog, right? Knowing I didn't even have to use her name, because I had her in my mind, right? Her face was in my mind's eye. Didn't even use her name. Now that I'm thinking about it, I just realized that. Didn't even use her name. I just had her envisioned in my mind and just repeated and chanted until I felt like, and I felt the energy just kind of like, whenever you're doing a spell, I'll mention that too. You know it's working when the energy starts to build, right? And it builds and builds and builds and builds and builds. And then it's almost like, pardon my phrasing, but it's almost like an orgasm, in the sense that it builds and then it releases. And that's when you know it's done. You know it's working when it builds, and then you know the work is done when it releases. And so it's kind of like that. So you don't have to use these tools if that's, helps you in building up that energy. If it makes you feel like that's going to help you, by all means. Like I said, I use tools, but it really comes down to, it's a lot of energy work. at the very, if you strip it all down, it's just energy work, and you're just using your own will to create, to manifest a specific outcome, right? And you'll build that energy. So my most powerful spells have been those without tools. It's just when you have a clear focus. And then for me, in that moment, I was chanting, make her sick as a dog, make her sick as a dog, make her sick as a dog, right? And felt that energy build, build, build. And then when I felt it release, I stopped. And I was like, okay, it's done. And then went downstairs not 2 minutes later, and the girl was literally on the floor, sick as a dog. Like, she even said, oh, I feel sick as a dog. And and instantly had the flu. Like, it was wild. It was not cool of me. I would never do that now, but it was wild and really, truly freaked me out, because I had never had something happen that fast, that strong before, at that point. So I'll mention that too. So really, that's what it comes down to. It's just it's like the magician card in tarot, right? This is somebody who is the master of manifesting, right? And they know how to use all of their tools, right? So using when tarot, it's you have your different, so you have your swords, which is mental, then you have wands, which is fire, cups, water, and then pentacles, which is earth, I think. Or is it, yeah, the swords is air. That's what I wanted to say. It's air. So if you want to use that. But and the magician knows how to use all of those elements in order to manifest, and that's what he uses for his magic. So this is somebody who is a master of that. So, and that's kind of really what witchcraft is at its, when, like I said, once you strip away all of the, stuff you saw in movies and all of that jazz, even take away all the tools. So take away all the candles, all that stuff. It comes down to energy work and knowing how to use it. So in some cases, it's going to be chanting. It could just be, that one focus meditation. So even if I was just focusing on that poor girl, just that, and with the intention of, I want her to be, and seeing her being ill, right? That's my intention. I could just do that. A lot of times, though, we will use things like, we'll have the circle of salt for protection, because we want to keep out anything that's, wanting to cause harm, or any of that. So it's the same when you're doing, I've mentioned it before, when you're using anything like talking boards, tarot or oracle cards, anything, your pendulum, anything where you're communicating with spirit, you have to make sure that you have clear boundaries and that you're keeping out anything that you want to be kept out. So let's say you want to communicate, we'll just say for an example, I know we're going over now, but now I'm going. So let's say I wanted to work with the Archangel Raphael, as I usually do. Okay, so I'm calling out to petition Archangel Raphael, but that just because that door is open now, right? So unless I take precautions, anything can come through. So it could be any angel, any spirit, any demonic, any fallen angel, anything. It could be extraterrestrial, right? That door is open. Anything can come through if I don't set boundaries. So that's why I have things like a circle of salt, or I'll use my athame or my wand to do a circle of protection around me. So you can use tools like that too. You can just use your own intention. So you can use what is that? A bubble of protection around yourself, and just visualize a shield if that's what you want to do, right? But you want to make sure that you're protecting yourself and keeping out anything you don't want coming in. Because once that door is open, when you're allowing communication with that spiritual realm, if you don't set boundaries and you don't set protection and all that jazz, anything can come through. And typically, it's going to be one of those lower vibe entities, which I can talk about in the ghost and the demon one classes that are going to be coming up. But typically, it's going to be those lower vibe ones. They're going to take advantage. They're going to come through and take advantage. So you really want to make sure that you have some kind of protection, some kind of boundary around you. Or even just call on the Archangel Michael. Be like, protect me, right? But just make sure you have something around you. Maybe light a blue candle for protection if you want to. But typically speaking, witchcraft is energy work, and it's about manifestation through your will. And like I said, you can use tools. You can use, I've used tools. I still, even while I work with angels, I'm using symbols, I'm using candles, I'm using herbs, oils, all that jazz when I'm doing something. So it just helps to, for some of us, it helps to focus that energy, or it gives us that sense of, I'm doing ceremonial magic. Ceremonial magic in itself is incredibly powerful. And you'll see that even in Christianity, they do rituals all the time.
Mhm.
You know, Catholics are doing rituals all the time. That's ceremonial magic that they're using when they're doing their, you know, the crossing things, and they have their, I think it's the Catholics that do like they have their, what is that, oh, what, their incense and their holy water, ceremonial magic. That's all ceremonial magic, and it's incredibly powerful. So yeah. Um, but yeah, I guess that was something that I didn't feel like I really got through earlier, and that wanted to come through. So yeah, so we've gone well over what I had meant to. So I guess I can wrap it up there, unless again you guys have something you want to share.
This is Susan again. About the only thing I would say, you talked about opening the door.
Mm-hmm.
When you finish the ceremony, you
Mm-hmm.
have to remember to close the door.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. So you might, and it depends again on the type of witch and the type of craft that you're doing. So for me, I will always, anytime I'm doing anytime I've opened the door to something for communication or spell, anything like that, I personally always end it with, like if I'm working with like angels and all that. So I will say, go if you must, stay if you will, and blessed be. But even if I leave out the stay if you will, right? Even if I left that out, my blessed be, my intention around that is that's the end, right? Door closed,
Okay.
right? So some people will use different words. That's just what I use to kind of close that door. So even if you're using a spirit board, you might go, okay, goodbye, right? You'll move the pendulum yourself, or
Yeah,
not the pendulum, the planchette.
that's
You'll move
it.
the planchette to goodbye, right? Door closed.
Yeah.
Uh, or same with my cards. I will, I'll be like, okay, we're done. Kind of like okay, thank you. Thank you for your messages. Blessed be.
Yeah.
Whenever I use the term, when I use the term blessed be in that circumstance, that's my way of saying goodbye, right? We're done,
Uh-huh.
kind of thing. And some ceremonies, especially if you're doing, depends again on your witch. I will often, once my spell and all that, once I'm done my ceremony, I will go counterclockwise to kind of open things back up. So that's how I kind of close it, is by
Oh,
opening it. Yeah, I'll go the opposite way. So I might go to open or to start it. Say I'm starting it, right? And I want to go, okay, I'm going to open the circle, right? So I'm doing magic. This is my time to do some magic, right? So I'm going to go clockwise, usually with my athame. And that's kind of like my circle of protection. That's my boundary, right? This is where I'm going. Once the ceremony's over, I'll go counterclockwise to kind of open that back up. Be like, okay, ceremony done. And I will do it that way. Yeah, it depends on your witch and their type of craft. Yeah, it depends, but yeah, absolutely, for sure. Whenever you're done doing a ceremony or spirit communication, any of that, you have to make sure, you're absolutely right, Susan. You have to make sure that you consciously, say goodbye, and okay, we're done now. Doors closed, right? You do not want to leave that open, because there are those lower entities that will take advantage and wreak havoc on your life and your health and all of that stuff. So for sure. Especially if I'm working with angels, so I'm always like, feel free to stay though, right? Because they're angels. So I'm like, feel free to stay. Everybody else go away. The angels, you can stay, right? And I've had some wild stories with angels too. So but yeah, maybe I'll say that for another one, since I've already gone so far over now. Okay, so if that's Brittany, do you have anything? Any questions or?
No questions. I'm looking forward to the next one though, so I can learn a little bit more. I'm gonna start looking up just a little bit more. Like I said, I didn't know there was so many different ones.
Oh,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I will wrap it up then. Again, and it also I'll mention really quickly too that if any questions or stories come up for you after this, you feel free to either share them in the group or you can bring them on over to the next class, even if the next class maybe isn't about witchcraft. If something comes up, I'm happy to hear about it. So but yeah, so we have our next class is going, well, I say class, but our next live, I should say, because I really want this to be more of a conversation. Like I bring my notes and all that just in case, you know, I need to maybe carry it or what have you. But our next one will be on October 12th, again at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That one will be about ghosts specifically. And different, just have some stories. I mean, as a medium, I've got some stories, but I can't wait to hear about Susan's because she does actual investigation. I go in just as the medium, but I don't actually do I don't have like gadgets and gizmos and a team with me, right? I typically will get called in. So mine's more of a, somebody will reach out in like an emergency type of situation where they're like, I think this is what's happening. Can you, come and help? It's not so much like investigate. It's more of a help me, kind of thing of, can you get rid of this thing? Or, can it's not so, it's mostly emergency stuff. I've had people who, called me and they're like, I just, was standing in the middle of the living room and got bitch slapped by air, right? Like what is
Wow.
going on? Right. And so I'll have to come in and be like, okay, so let's have a conversation now. You can't go around slapping people, right? Um, but yeah, I don't really capture like evidence per se, uh, where there's like cameras and all of that jazz. So, which I love that stuff. And I wish I had a team, but it's not to be at this moment anyway. So, but yeah, so we'll wrap that up for now. But yeah, we could talk about all that stuff, all the ghosts and investigations and mediumship and all that fun stuff. So if you have any questions about that or stories you want to share, so we will have that on October 12th. And I'll be recording it, so there'll be a replay. So if you're not able to attend it, but you have questions or stories, just leave them in the comments in the group and I will do what I can with them when we go live.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here. This was so much fun. And honestly, when it comes to the spooky stuff, I can literally talk about it for hours. So I'll wrap it up there for now. And then I tell you what, though, when we talk about ghosts and stuff, oh boy, I'm gonna have to reel
I'm
myself
gonna
in
go
because
over.
I can go.
Let's plan on going over.
Oh yeah, like I have it set for an hour. I might tweak it, make it an hour and a half because I'm probably going to go over.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah.
And I hope to see you guys next week and then next week's to come. Uh, and have a great rest of your day. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye. You too.
Thanks.